of my research into claims of persecution against Christianity in China. If there's any feedback, go into the community tab of my channel as per standard. Feel free to interact here. And again, I will respond if anything comes up. And with that, I will start off with it. Religion in China. An image which is what some see, and it's contradictory, mostly is an act of a state persecution. It is known, for the most part, that the Communist Party of China does not allow religious affiliation for membership. That is true. That's only for the Communist Party of China itself. The atheist-only policy only exists to the Communist Party itself explicitly. There might be some other minor parties which might have some light policy of that, but are they the majority? No, not necessarily. You can be privately religious in other groups, I'm sure, if you want to. And that'll be fine. You can work with the Communist Party, so on and so on. China had no policy regarding religion. Changed in Italy. Joined under nationalist parties rule to provide a power and no actual policy on religious rules. Any Chinese policy regarding religion that was on a national level came in the aftermath of 1949 of a communist victory, with no national policy regarding religion prominent beforehand at the whims of warlords and allies of the Republic of China. Common program adopted by the first plenary session of the National People's Congress. Article 5 of the Committee of the Chinese Political Consultative Conference on September 29th, 1949 stipulates that the People's Republic of China have the right to freedom of religious belief. The Constitution of the People's Republic of China, promulgated in 1954, stipulates citizens of the People's Republic of China have religious freedom of belief. This is the document, just doing the shorthand of it. Anyway, as I was saying, the case is that China right to religion was never an absolute thing before this. There was some preferential treatment here and there, and so on, and some affiliation, sure, but there wasn't like a national policy because there was too much instability. Here you go. As I said in the beginning point, the law also stipulates the citizens have the right to vote and be elected regardless of their religious beliefs. The legal property of religious groups is protected by law. Education and religion are separated. Citizens have equal opportunities to receive education regardless of religious beliefs. And most importantly, in this, let me try and find it again. Chinese law stipulates that while citizens enjoy the right to freedom of religious belief, they must also undertake the obligations stipulated by law. In China, any person, any group, including any religion, should safeguard the interests of the people, dignity of law, and unity of ethnic group, and unity of the country. The next part links directly to Sun Yat-sen and Chiang Kai-shek. This part here might seem irrelevant, but it actually is important. With Sun Yat-sen's death in February 1925, Xi'an was free to try his own implementations of the Three Principles people. Fortunately for Xi'an, Sun never constructed a formal system. With this kind of latitude, Xi'an could envision himself as loyal to Sun and his principles without continuing the ill-advised alliance with the communists. In the book, Triumph After Catastrophe, State, Church, and Society in Post-Boxer China, 1900 to 1937, it says, when the Revolutionary Alliance was established in 1905, Sun stated in its platform that anyone who would murder a foreigner and who would destroy a church would be executed. Sun Yat-sen and his fellow revolutionaries matched their words defending Christianity with actions. 6 days after the Wuchang uprising in 1911, the military command at Wuhan order to local people were not to harm foreigners and damage their property, in particular not to burn churches. The book continued to say, Chiang Kai-shek converted to Christianity in the first instance because of his marriage to Mi-Long-sung, but also because he saw himself as Sun Yat-sen's disciple and heir. The national government established under Xiang in 1927 proved not only supportive of Christianity but also worked closely with Christian missionaries and converts, leading many Christians to speak of the 1927 to 1993 decade as the 10 years of revival. However, the rise of Xi'an and the Chinese Nationalist Party brought the believers up against a new enemy, the communists, In general, the missionaries supported Xiang and viewed communism as a threat. This is why I said the comment in Shanghai Shek and Christianity, which is what I got the earlier quote from about Sun's succession, matters here. Going back to Xiang and Christianity, it says this. After 1930, Christianity was to play a significant role in Chiang's affairs, both in his thoughts and actions. It is almost inconceivable, for instance, that Chiang would have relied so heavily on missionary support and advice in his rural reconstruction program, essential in discrediting communist reforms, had he not been a Christian himself. Yet Chiang's religion, of daily importance to himself, has been largely overviewed by historians. It also says here, it says a little bit down, I'm not going to scroll down because that'd be too annoying. Xiang's recognition of the strength of Western institutions, in sharp contrast to the weakness of those in China, the leading military powers of the day, had all adopted Western technology and therefore become successful. As Xiang was first and foremost a military man, he had great influence on the conception of ideas really supported a military powerful nation through him. The most progressive men in China were Dr. Sun Yat-sen and his associates, and they were heavily influenced by Western political and economic principles. Though such precarious associations with the West, Chiang later moved closer to formal adoption of Christianity. This also is a really good comment. The disagreements between Chiang and Sun over the role of Soviet Russia in China's revolution was to have direct influence on Chiang's religious life. His distrust and eventual hatred of communism led not only to disagreements with Sun, but also to search for every resource in combating godless communism. Alongside with the distinctly puritanical virtues derived from his study of East Asian philosophy, Chiang's hatred of communism was one more step towards militant Christianity he would embrace. It continues to say, the expulsion of the Communist Party members from the Kuomintang, which is the Chinese Nationalist Party, through his intense hatred of communism, Chiang had begun to seek alliances with who might otherwise have been shunned. Thus, Chiang's association with Russia and Chinese communists pushed him towards a careful examination of Christianity and the benefits it might provide in combating communism. In 1926, his interest was altogether utilitarian. This gives a greater angle to Chiang's use of and loose adaptation of Christianity as a means to fight against an enemy which he saw as a greater threat. By weaponizing faith and religion to prop up his own rule and power, thus where the whole godless communist clause came from with regards to nationalist China, as they wanted nothing to do under Chiang's rulership with left-wing communists, who they perceived as a threat to unity and as a whole. How this relates then to what I announced in my basic video. Explain for upcoming Christianity and China interesting accusations. This is indeed part one of it. Don't be confused. I just need to cover a few more things in general before we even get to that more seriously. There's a few things about the Taiping rebellion and some other minor stuff before I can even get to that, which then will lead to the 2005 reforms. And for that, I will maybe cover the Taiping rebellion section next. And I will begin my next one with the other sources of my list, which is talking about some quotes from Chinese Christian sites leading into reforms. Before I move on to the next section, which is Hong and the Taiping Rebellion, or Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, however you want to say it, I think it's important to mention that in the previous section, I want to make it very clear the policy about this is that as a whole, I'm just trying to cover backstory right now, just so when I do get to accusations, you can understand enough when we go forward. Because without proper understanding of the background, and yes, of course, there's the people who say, what about Tang Dynasty? You are absolutely correct. That will come into play. Just not now. In the next video, when I talk about reforms and so on, which will be part 2, that I'll mention, because there was a difference in direction there. Christianity as a whole, in China's context, didn't come peacefully Anyway, I'm talking about Taiping period in this context here. The Tang Dynasty will be relevant next, as I said, so don't worry. I am not forgetting the Tang Dynasty. Foreign power is by influence through concessions. Even a rebellion was inspired by Christianity. The rebellion led by Hong Xingzhuang. So I can't say pronunciations well. Forgive me about that. Of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom is a case of where Christianity inspired a complete disaster. Not only did Hong lead millions of Chinese people to die for his rebellion, which estimates between 20 million and 30 million deaths, which was a rebellion against the Qing dynasty, but also proclaimed, well, added to the above of Jesus. Sources talking about Hong and Christianity has also an interesting variety. This except here, in an article written by Matthew Smarts, named Hong Xinghuang and the Subversion of Christianity, said, based on the evidence, Roberts was extremely dismayed. Roberts is the person who converted Hong in the first place. Dismayed that his students sought financial assurances regarding his future. A great opportunity for further instruction in Christian doctrine. In fact, I believe many of Hong's failure to abandon financial security in return for Christian education may have affected his late interpretation of Christian doctrine. I am also convinced that Hong's objective was to manipulate the religion he had grown to appreciate in order to secure his own personal well-being. Even at the early stages, Hong's intentions were not holy, for if they were, he would have abandoned his desire for financial reward. However, it would be quite clear that Hong cared not for the sanctity of the word for God, but for the word of Hong. Now turn to Guanxi in June 1847. At the time, converted many to his movement, which he is now identified as God worshippers. The source goes into another interesting case study, where according to the source, a different deviation was completely made by this, being a complete distortion. Where it says, Hong's ability to lead a constructive Christian movement was impeded by his dictatorial reach and his mental instability. And if this wasn't if in this case, to what extent did other basic New Testament doctrines? Taiping Christianity was in fact a combination of the Orthodox, heterodox, and Chinese indigenous influences, while worshipping God, proclaiming Christ and Saviour, adhering to the Ten Commandments, and practicing the sacrament of baptism. They also began to incorporate a number of their own traditions. Hong was largely to blame for the implementation of these new practices. The first example to point out was how Taipings worship God. The worshipping of God was a central tenet in the Taiping faith. Hong is known to have borrowed and added to the Hebrew Bible with respect to understanding God. First, Hong believed that God was like a father to his people by using the notion of fatherhood. Hong was also trying to make an association with ancient Chinese Confucianism, which is also another connecting point to how Xiang used Christianity as well, but that's just a side point. Back to the context. The idea of filial piety to your parental figures and figures of authority, especially towards Hong, made the connection God, Father, and his Taiping children on Earth seem more realistic. An excellent example of Hong Kong's manipulation of God the Father took place on July 29th, 1851. Hong informed his army officers that the titles Supreme, Shang, Lord, Ti, and Father, Ya, were to be strictly used for praising God. Apparently, royal ministers up to the point have been called royal fathers. More specifically, I think Hong distorted the sense of divine rule, covenant within religion. This was continued by the notion of fatherhood of God was taken to another level when Hong interpreted God's purpose to be productive heavenly figure. In this sense, I believe Hong assumed God was responsible for Taiping's. In this sense, I believe Hong assumed God was responsible for Taiping's military successes and establishment of heavenly kingdom. So while God was portrayed as being peaceful, he was also recognized for his ability to craft successful sieges against the sinful Qing. Likewise, while Hong took bits and pieces of core Protestant Christian principle to fit his needs, he also developed a new family system out of line with Protestant doctrine. Yeah, that's important here because he took origin from Protestant Christianity. In his family system, he inserted a heavenly mother, possibly Mary, in order to round out the heavenly father and son, which is a Catholic doctrine. Remarkably, Hong gave Jesus a wife, but no son. Instead, he made his own son the adopted heir to his heavenly big brother's kingdom. I argue that Hong's reconstruction of family of heaven, God and God as heavenly defender, was due to three reasons: his mental condition, his firm belief in the notion of feudal piety to Chinese Confucian traditions, and his lack of comprehensive Protestant Christianity concepts all contributed to these two preceding Taiping doctrines. I think that's fair enough in part, but I also think at the same time, I don't think it was Christian either, because much like some figures, they use religion and spirituality as a weapon to get more personal power and gain. With that personal power and gain, they can expand and get power and influence. Overall, though, the source summed up at the very end, his demagogic and authoritarian approach towards religious matters was not Christian behavior. In the 19th century, Europe was the most secular leaders had all abandoned the doctrines of divine right. Hong, however, was the embodiment of the Taipings of religion and state. Yet Hong was a capable spiritual and temporal leader. In fact, he was not a leader, he was an antithesis of both, former and latter. Hong was the embodiment of a future 20th century dictator who believed their conception of the world has to be the correct one. To some extent, yes, I agree. I'd say as well that it extends actually towards the end, and even later ROC history in general, how they, maybe not religion itself, but other things, how attitude came through. I was finished off by saying, it's very ironic then, the path of Hong Zhongyang would be repeated later on in Chinese history in our own time, to finish off the background to modern claims regarding religious oppression. So to sum up everything I've covered in this video, and this is only part 1, I'll be doing part 2 and part 3. I'll make as many parts as it needs to be, to give proper context and respect to my sources. Yeah, anyway, we covered the Republic of China, some basic rudimental laws in China today, and the Taiping Rebellion. I can only cover a tiny fragment of everything, but if you want to read any of this properly, feel free to do so. I'll be linking absolutely everything in the description below. Every link titled, so feel free to read it. And most of all, this is going to be a new style I want to be doing. Research, essays, and like editing to make some really interesting concepts for you all regarding China, cultural stuff, and political affairs in this style. And I hope everyone had a lovely time watching this video overall. And I'll give my final thoughts on the whole question about how much role do I think Christianity had. Did it have as much role as other places in the world? No. That is absolutely true. But was it a role of like nothing? No. It still had some power. It had some people think or do otherwise. And anyway, to give one clarification, yes, I do understand Xiang was just abusing religion to some extent while using most Confucian ideologies. That was just the source itself, because it had some actual good, interesting points otherwise. But, as I said to you, read it if you find any of this interesting. And I'll keep going with this. And the next part will be talking about Chinese Christian advocates, as well as the 2005 reforms to religion and the 2017 reform to religion, as they are essential to understand before even addressing claims of persecution. Because just because of persecution, we need to understand what the reforms meant. If the reforms aren't explained, and I'm just blind, just tell you persecution numbers or persecution porn in some cases, because that's what half it is. That is going to be very just saying nothing of no substance, and then doing this whole series is useless, because then I'll be like saying like, oh look, X numbers XXX with nothing to back it up, nothing to give background to, nothing to balance everything out with. Then doing this would be literally useless, and my hours on research would be useless.